Hi, I'm back. I just took a little break there, so I'm back because I wanted to continue from where I left off, but in a different vein, okay? So we're going to talk about sex problems and solutions, number 18. Okay, so this is a question I get asked often. It's like people say, Dr. Kathy, you know, this is really boring. Sex is really boring because she or he doesn't spontaneously ask for sex, right? So there's some frustration on the couple's part where they really don't get to feel that it is spontaneous. And I started wondering, okay, what is the importance of being spontaneous? And I know it's fun, we see it in the movies a lot, right? But it's a question that people ask me, and I always wonder what is the importance. And I realized that, lo and behold, spontaneous sex is what we see in the movies, right? It's what we see romantically put together. And we want some of that, right? Because it looks so yummy, so good. So I wonder, spontaneous sex versus planned sex or scheduled sex, right? So a lot of us know that when we're busy, right, whether you're married, in a relationship, living together, single, living apart, life gets busy and we're always on the go. And we sometimes forget that we've got to have that intimate relationship with our partner. So when we are forgetting, you won't realize it, and then time goes by and we haven't had sex, especially in marriages, right? Months can go by. But we want to make sure that that doesn't happen by scheduling it, right? But then it turns people off. Why do we have to schedule it? So let's talk about it a little bit, okay? So what is unplanned sex? All right. So I've got this dictionary definition, and unplanned sex is sexual intercourse that a person or an individual decides out of free will as undesired, which means they weren't desiring it before, or spontaneous sexual activity that was not thought of, okay? Not thought out beforehand or not prepared in advance. So that we didn't think about it, was like, oh my gosh, I want to have sex out of the blue, okay? I love that word or those words, out of the blue, right? So it's out of the blue, it's spontaneous. Another definition that I have is performed or occurring as a result of sudden inner impulse. You got this impulse, I just want to have sex. Or an inclination without premeditation. Now, that one upsets me a little bit, without premeditation. So, come on, without thinking, without thought, without planning. Yeah, I get it, but you really, really do have to think about it, right? Now, premeditation, is there a time limit on premeditation? Nah, there's no time limit. But premeditation means you thought about it. So they're saying spontaneity or spontaneous sex is without really thinking about it, right? Premeditation without thinking about the fact that you want to plan and have sex. So that is something that I have some bones to pick about because it's really hard to be spontaneous without planning, right? But at the same time, I know the guys like it, and I know we like it as girls. We like it because it makes us feel wanted. But sometimes if it's not done right, if the timing is not right, it can be a disaster, right? So we don't want to sort of not plan. So that's the key, that's the question. Spontaneous sex, schedule sex. So when you schedule sex, it's like on a calendar. So I really don't like that word scheduled because it seems a little bit too formal. And we want to sort of like make sex a little bit more natural, right? We like that word natural. But here are the words that I want to identify so that you know what spontaneity, what spontaneous sex is about, what is involved in spontaneous sex. So some words I'm going to throw in there: uninhibited, right? You're free. You don't feel any reservations. I love that word, uninhibited. You really want to express yourself with your partner. Again, male, female, male, same sex, female, uh, male. You really want to just suddenly, out of the blue, say or indicate your feelings or your desire to have sex, right? So that's uninhibited. Natural, I said natural already. Open, you're open. There's nothing to be ashamed about. You're free. You feel that you can be approached anytime. No one's scared. No one's looking at a frown on your face, right? So you don't want that frown on your face. You want that smile so that people can approach you, your partner can approach you without any fear of being rejected, right? So that spontaneity, there's got to be an openness, right? On both parts. Unforced, it's not something that you're like trying to do and make the person feel uncomfortable or make the person feel that they've got to do it. It's natural, again, unforced. Voluntary, you're doing it out of your own free will. Unconstrained, there's no constraint, you're not holding back. Unsolicited, you're just doing it because you haven't asked about it and you just feel it and you just want to talk about it within, minutes, right? Unprompted, no one prompted you. Unself-conscious, you don't feel self-conscious. Easy, it just comes and it flows naturally. Again, it flows easily. Whatever you're going to do, you're going to approach and you're going to say something to indicate that you want to have sex for it to be spontaneous. You don't think about it, right? But again, I've got bones to pick about that. You don't think about it. I know in the movies that's what they portray, but honestly, we need to think about it. Okay. So timing is everything, because if you do it the wrong time, it sometimes will backfire. And so you have to sometimes think a little bit, right? And I really do like some planning behind it. Does it make it spontaneous? Well, you can make it spontaneous by planning to make it spontaneous, right? So you don't really have to sit down and put it on, again, a calendar or in your books, in your diary. You can really think about it as planning to surprise your partner, right? Okay, so let's go into what should be involved in being spontaneous. Now, I love my five senses, so I like to break it down into our senses, okay? So, touch. So, how can we touch spontaneously, right? So, if we think about touching, you can think about a kiss, a little light kiss, right? A little nuzzle around the nape or the neck. You run your fingers through someone's hair, those of us that don't mind, right? You touch the back, just rub the back, or even massage the shoulders. This is an indication that something else is going to happen, right? Now, who should do it first? I'm going to say it very clearly. It should be both. We should always make sure that the female is actually instigating or starting this, uh, I'll call it the starting of the sexual process. Now, I'm not going to say foreplay. I'm just going to say the introduction of the sexual act, right? You want to sort of think of it as intentional, right? Because you want the person to get the message that you are trying to get them involved or aroused so that they'll engage in sex with you. But you can't be, like I said, opposite to what I mentioned, timid, shy. It's too forced. You didn't really think about how to be spontaneous. You've got to have some flow with you. You've got to have some idea of what the person that you're with would like, right? So there's got to be some thought in it. So that, again, that question of being unplanned or being scheduled, you've got to have something there that will give you some idea that it is something you arrange, but you can still, again, make it spontaneous by planning it. Okay, so we're going to talk about that because I know a lot of people don't think spontaneity involves planning, right? But I feel a little bit uncomfortable because I know that spontaneity can involve things that might be risky, right? So you still have to think about it. So we'll get there in a second. So let's say you brush against, for touch, you brush against your partner "Oh, I'm sorry," and you bump into the partner, right? And you smile or you wink. Again, that's something that is your touching senses. You you can actually use candles, right? And touch, right? If you light the candles and those candles are if it's close to your partner, you can use those candles, and sometimes you can just rub it against the partner. Just play with the candles, so the person gets the message that you are actually thinking of lighting the candles. And of course, we know why we light candles, right? So just play with the candles, right, and touch them. Okay, um, and we know that holding hands, caressing, uh, just you know, hugging, maybe a prolonged hug, you know, dancing, touching. Those are ways of sending signals that you are about to do something a little bit more sexually intended. So if someone does that out of the blue, it's spontaneous, right? But again, we've got to make sure that we are doing it and the person that is receiving it likes it, right? We've got to make sure. Sometimes you won't be sure, but we want to at least attempt and be aware that we've got to think about it a little bit, okay? Sight, all right? I'm big into sight, vision, right? Candles, light them up. We know what that means. Petals, right? We throw some petals, rose petals on the bed or on the floor, make a trail, right? Again, sight, spontaneous. I want to do something to surprise them. I want to put some petals and lead it to the bedroom, okay? We have to do that, men and women. We've got to engage in spontaneous sex because it makes it exciting. It bridges that connection. It makes you feel a little bit more engaged and connected with your partner. But if you don't have spontaneous sex and it's always scheduled, it's going to be boring and it's going to be something that someone's going to complain about because, again, sometimes you want it just to be passionate, unexpected, out of the blue, and a surprise, a pleasant surprise. Okay, so again, uh, vision, sexting, right, on the phone. Again, lingerie, even leaving some love notes. I love that, leaving some love notes. Okay, smell. Again, that's another sense. Flowers, right? Big into smell. You come home, smell flowers. It's like, oh my gosh, that's beautiful. Big, like nice surprise, and then you know that something has happened, depending on how it gives you the flowers, right? And you'll be happy that something is happening usually, but did the person plan the flowers or did they just out of the whim bring the flowers to the house? To me, that's spontaneous. If some Sunday suddenly you come home and there's flowers and it's like out of the blue, he doesn't normally do that. Again, that's a sign and an indication that something's going to happen. Now, is that spontaneous? I don't know. If he comes from behind the door and he whisks you and lifts you up and then starts to make sweet, loving words or hugging and trying to rub you, and then you say, okay, I get the message, right? Is that spontaneous? Yes. Do you think about it a little bit? Yes. So we have to do some thinking when it comes to spontaneity, right? Sexual spontaneity. Hearing, sense of hearing, music. Music is so important for me. Love music. Um, Also, that whispering in the ears is so sensual, right? So some people might not like it, right? So be aware, but you've got to find out what sounds the person's like. So if the person doesn't want to whisper, does the person mind the music? What sort of music do they want? You play music. You've got to think what music you're going to play for your partner, so that they also will know. Oh, it's that song again, and then you know that something's going to come out of that, or something the person wants to come out of that in terms of sexual intercourse. Taste, right? We know it's going to be food. If someone makes your best food, the favorite food that you love, you're going to want to say, okay, what's going on, right? Someone cooks a gourmet meal for you, you're going to say, oh my gosh, something is going on. Now, is that spontaneous? Depends on how often they do it. So you are going to have to decide whether that is really spontaneous. Now, I know spontaneous means just grabbing you and doing it right there. But again, spontaneity can be planned and can be just something that you see as spontaneous, but the person has planned it behind the scene. Okay? And that's something that I believe we should do. We should really have some planning and make it spontaneous. Okay? Why? Get that checkoff list because you don't want to make a mess. You don't want to make it uncomfortable. You don't want to make it feel awkward when you're doing the spontaneity. So you want to list everything in terms of planning. So there I go. Yes, you want to plan it. We're not talking about scheduling, right? We're talking about planning spontaneity. Okay. So you want to get that list. I'm going to come back to it. But remember, the quickie also is spontaneous, right? So that quickie is easy for partners that know each other. And if you're thinking of someone that you don't know and you want to do a quickie, you still have to think about some things. Consent. Is the person, the stranger, the person that you just met, consenting? Now, obviously, that's each to their own, right? When you're thinking of a spontaneous sexual act with a stranger, it can be a little bit risky, but you've got to think of these things: consent, safety, right? You got to make sure that you're using your protection and that the person is not someone that will harm you, right? So it's very important to think about that. Communication, you're going to make sure you're communicating. Of course, that's going to be the initial reason why you might be wanting to have spontaneous sex with a stranger, but usually with your partner, you're communicating, you're talking, and they're someone that you can do that easily with. So when you're easily talking with someone, you can actually easily surprise them, right? Because it's just something comes out of the blue. But if you're not communicating, the person's not going to really be interested in doing anything spontaneous with you. Emotional context, you've got to be emotionally connected when you're doing this. So spontaneity usually happens with people that know each other. Otherwise, there's got to be some emotional connection there. Okay. Legal consideration. You got to be careful. If you do it outside where it's in the public, you get arrested. So you got to consider again, thinking, where do you do it? In the car, in the pool, right? In someone's, backyard, in the movie theater. You got to be careful. There are legal ramifications if you do it somewhere that you shouldn't really do it, right? So again, you got to think. Personal preference, boundaries, you got to think of that too. What does that person prefer? So when you're being spontaneous, yeah, you can, but you got to nowadays, especially nowadays, be careful. Okay, so let's talk about that list. Now, for me, it's hygiene, right? For me, number one is hygiene. So if you're going to be spontaneous, sometimes you can't really think of hygiene, right? So don't you think we should plan a little bit about hygiene? Either get waxed, again, if you prefer that, get shaved, guys, whatever it is, you want to sort of make sure that you are at least decent in terms of your hygiene. So that's a checkup, right? So if you're going to plan to be spontaneous, I think you should involve that. And also, again, we talked about the music, the props, the flowers, the candles, the petals, the dim light, right? Dim the light. Um, the sheets, right? You want to get nice sheets. Sometimes you want to get even rubber sheets, right? Waterproof sheets, right? Or towels, right? You want to play some games sometimes. Again, being spontaneous, out of the blue, you bring these games. Again, that will be sexual games, safe, consensual sexual games. And then even for those that need to get some help, get a pill, right? The blue pill, or is it the purple pill? The blue pill. Or, again, the woman that needs to get that cream, right? That helps her in terms of sexual intercourse. So there's got to be some planning, because if you suddenly just do it and she's in pain or she's on her cycle, it's not going to be as pleasant, or it's going to be a no, which you don't really want to get. So yes, spontaneous sex is great, but I really think we have to plan it, okay? When it comes to scheduled sex, yes, if you're busy, especially when you're married, you tend to forget about sex because so many things happen. You have kids and you're on the hustle bustle and you tend to forget. So yes, you can schedule it, but schedule it meaning it doesn't have to be on the wall, but it can be something that you say, okay, every Friday is going to be date night. right? And so every Friday, you make sure that either a babysitter is there or someone's there to help, and you can go out, the two of you, and have your nice time, okay? Again, that's scheduled, because it's found that if you don't, the number of sexual acts reduces. So if you don't schedule, so if you find that you're not getting regular sex, and you know I always want at least 2 to 3 times a week because you live longer. And yes, some of it can be spontaneous, but remember, plan to be spontaneous, right? Let the person not know, but you are planning everything behind the scenes, right? So that person might not need to know, but you are planning it. And sometimes that person might need to know, right? Depending on the person. So you got to know who you're dealing with, right? If the person doesn't like to be surprised, don't surprise them. If the person loves to be surprised, surprise them as much as you can and as many times as you can. But when it comes to, scheduling, don't look at it as a negative, because studies show that there are um, patients or people that don't mind planned or scheduled sex. They are sexually satisfied with scheduled sex, and some people say, if it's scheduled, it's boring. So remember, guys, especially guys, even though it's scheduled, it's not boring. Ladies, if it's scheduled, it's not boring. Yes, you can sometimes scream at the mountaintop if he takes you up the stairs and just does it somewhere behind closed doors on the staircase or something. But it's not really for everybody, right? So you got to know who you're dealing with. You have to know that the spontaneity is awesome, but the frequency of how often you have sex is really what matters. So, what am I saying in the end? I'm saying whether it's spontaneous, whether it's planned, unplanned, whether it's scheduled, the most important thing is make sure you're having regular, frequent sex to satisfy both of you. Okay? All right, guys, just wanted to talk about that. Be spontaneous, surprise your partner once in a while, and make it beautiful, creative, so you have a lot of fun in that bedroom. Okay? All right, bye. See you next time, which is tomorrow. Bye.